back in the time of apartheid, they, just like you had in America, geographically you were excluded from being too close to where the economic activity is happening or to where the best of the country was at. And then in the environment, there's a lot of lack, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of competing for the same resources. For the as long as, even if you have that communal mindset, but they're still having to fight for the common resources, right? And so then you grow up with this smallness mentality. Like I grew up in a small town, like a really tiny town. So you have this small mindedness, not because of you're small minded, but because of everything in your area is so small.
What's happening, y'all? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now, where we're bringing the village to the brothers. Every couple of weeks, you can look forward to a quick inspirational message or a thought-provoking guest with knowledge and wisdom, all geared towards helping you be the best father that you can be. We're bringing the village to you. Now it's your turn to do something with what you learned. All right, y'all. Let's go. What's going on, fellas? This is Mike D, Mr. Double Down on You, with another episode of Black Fathers Now. Now, I know some people don't recognize or realize the impact that we're having around the world. But when you listen to the guest that I'm rapping with today, who's currently based in South Africa, you'll understand that Black Fathers Now is a brand that is really impacting the world and helping brothers around the world, change how they think, adjust their mindset. And you're going to hear mindset come up a lot in our conversation, but then also put into practice, things, tools, and resources that are allowing them to be the best version of themselves, right? And again, not just in the United States, but around the world. And the brother that I'm chatting with today is none other than Jabu Zwane. And Jabu is from South Africa. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a mindset development specialist. I mean, he's really an all-around powerful brother who has a story that I'm super excited to hear about. He and I have chatted numerous times, via WhatsApp, and he mentioned that he has a story. And I said, hold up, don't tell me the story now, because I want to be in the discovery mode with the audience on really learning more about your background. So fellas and ladies listening too, because y'all tuning into what we talking about, let's welcome my man, Jabu Zwane. What's up, brother?
Very well, thank you. I'm good, brother. Darcy, how are you doing? How are you doing, sir?
Doing very, very well, man. Thank you for joining us way over there in South Africa, man. This is awesome to have a conversation, man.
Oh, thank you so much for just making this happen. I'm so looking forward to what we're going to be talking about. And I also want to thank you so much, just for the opportunity. And at this particular moment in time, actually, I'm living a dream, because I was planning to be in the United States at this particular time. But because of all these COVID restrictions, apparently the virus in my side of the world is so scary that we have to be locked into our country and not get anywhere into the world. So I'm stuck here. But anyway, I'm having a conversation with you, so it's all good.
Oh, you're not stuck. Check this out. We're communicating and we're connecting now. It's virtually, but guess what? We're still connecting and communicating. So can't nobody stop the show, man.
That's what I'm talking about.
I love it. I love it. Well, my brother, I mentioned that, you're a husband, you're a father, you're based in South Africa, you're a mindset development specialist, and I'm excited to jump into your journey. But as everybody who listens to Black Fathers Now knows, before we jump into your journey, I like the brothers to give shout outs, because who are we without our village that allows us to be the best version of who we are?
Yeah, I think the first shout out that I want to give, of course, is the Almighty God. Without God, I wouldn't be here today. Honestly, so much of who I am today has everything to do with what He has allowed and the journey that He has destined for me to take. And along with that, I'm thinking about the people that He's brought into my life, and currently my wife, my beautiful wife, and her support, and my children, my 4 sons and my 1 daughter. So I'm a father of 5. Wow. I was waiting for clap your friends. I didn't see that happening, bro.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, a father of 5 boys, 5 boys. That is a calling, and that is a responsibility. That's a sacred responsibility for an African man to have 5 boys. And my spiritual mentor, the man that discipled me, Pastor Ronaldo Brown, he's actually based in Baltimore. He's the man that I met 20 years ago as a missionary coming in South Africa, and is responsible for a lot of the man that I am today. And I continue to be tightly linked up with him. And my pastor, also Pastor Manny Harrison, and a lot of people all over the world. I mean, my tribe in South Africa in the form of the church that I go to, and my team in the Mindset Development Institute that I'm currently running with a few people. So there's so many people to mention. If I didn't mention, it's not because you're not special or anything like that. It's just that, suppose my life is rich, full of incredible people.
And it's interesting. And that's where, a lot of times people will say, blame it on my head, not my heart, right? Meaning I might have forgotten a name here or there, but hearing you say that, it made me think about it a little bit differently, in a sense that, sometimes I am so fortunate and blessed to have so many people around me that I no longer have to mention specific names. I just got to say, look, man, just everybody who has had any level of touch point in my life, thank you. That's my team, that's my village. And because it's so many to list, it's hard to throw names out there. So it just made me think about the whole concept of really, when you're blessed, when you're fortunate, when you really have a village, you basically just say my village. Like anybody who's had a touch point, you're part of it. You're allowing me to be who I am.
I mean, you're saying something very important there, the power of community. And I think a lot of times we can self-isolate so much. And you know what? I mean, reasonably so. Life can be difficult. People can be difficult. Life is full of disappointments. People can let us down. And unfortunately, when those moments happen, they stay hurt. They hit so hard. Then we develop a mindset of being protective, and we can have a combative attitude towards relationships because of disappointment. But when we open ourselves up to the reality that, you know what, we're all a bunch of imperfect people just trying to make an amazing life together. And in the process, we can get things wrong. And then when people do let you down, it's not such a big deal. You just understand that it's part of what happens in life. You just roll with the punches and just figure out how can you contribute your best. How can you not withhold off yourself so that you can receive from others the best that they can offer. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the best that they offer also comes a lot of times with the worst that they can offer.
That's what's so interesting there is, again, you think about the first law of thermodynamics. And I think you and I spoke about this in our online conversations that we've had, how, energy is neither lost nor gained, is simply transferred, right? And so when you have extreme highs, a lot of times you have extreme lows, and that comes into play, especially when I've interviewed a lot of brothers who, maybe are sitting at the top of the food chain now, like they're sitting with extreme highs and doing this and doing that. If you hear their story, you hear the valleys that they had to navigate through, right? The challenges that they've had to face. And it was kind of like the pendulum had to swing in that extreme level or in that extreme way to balance off the extreme hurt or the extreme pain or the extreme challenges that they faced. So that's interesting that you brought that up, because I see that on a very regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about what you say now, especially with the village and with the community, we live in a world where I suppose more and more of that is kind of like changing, it's changing. The more and more people become very self-oriented and self-centered. And a lot of times we're doing that as a way, I suppose, of trying to from external harm that other people can do. And what ends up happening is that we start to really not, we create an environment where people are not really free also to express the best of themselves, right? We create an environment where if you're going to express the best of who you are, you're more likely presenting yourself as a victim of exploitation or a potential victim of exploitation. And then people just hold back. Because the more entitled we feel, the less grateful we become. The less grateful we become, the more we withhold praise, the more we withhold praise that is due, the more we withhold encouragement, the more we withhold veneration, and not in a way of self-worship, but in a way that says, you know what, Brother Mike, I really appreciate the fact that you have given me this opportunity right now to talk to your village, to talk to your people. You didn't have to do that. Who am I? We know each other. Yes, we're both brothers. Yes, we're both African. Yes, we are both men. Yes, we're fathers. Yes, there's so many commonalities between you and I. But by and large, what obligation do you have to even bring me on this platform for me to access your hard work in the way that you have? None whatsoever. But if I feel that I'm fantastic, I'm great, I'm amazing, you know what, Brother Mike Dossi must actually recognize that I got something, I got game. And if you don't see the game, then he's lost. You know what I mean? But I mean, to be grateful, when you become grateful, then we don't withhold what is due to others. And what I find is that also others don't withhold, not necessarily what is due to us, but what they feel is due to us.
Ooh, you said something there that is powerful. You said when you're grateful, you don't withhold what is due to others. When you're grateful, you don't withhold what is due to others. You also said something a little bit earlier, and you said, you know, a lot of us don't have an environment in which we are free to express the best version of ourselves. And that was very, very deep and very profound in my perspective, because I think that's, you know, you hear people talk about not the fear of failure, but the fear of success, right? So it's not always the premise of I'm scared this might not work out. Some people are scared that, you know what, this thing might actually hit in a way that I'm not prepared for. And I'm scared of being, you know, this magnanimous figure. You know, I'm scared of being this celebrity or this thing that everybody in the world wants a piece of, and they want to have me on all these different platforms and all of that stuff. I'm scared of becoming that. I'm scared of having, you know, millions or maybe billions of dollars to manage, you know, while I'm here on earth. You know, there's some, I think, that then do this self-sabotage in a sense that I don't want to create an environment in which the best version of me can manifest, because I'm fearful that it actually might work and I don't know if I can handle it. That's one. But then back to this conversation of the pendulum swing. If we really take a look and understand that there are going to be extreme highs, you know, the opposite is there as well. Are we prepared to deal with the extreme lows that come from having extreme highs? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I'll put it this way. I've lived that reality you're explaining. I've lived the reality because of my own background, because of where I come from. You know, typically I also grew up in a typical township, which is something similar to what you call a ghetto in the States, where it was predominantly for Black people. And obviously back in the time of apartheid, you know, just like you had in America, geographically you were excluded from being too close to where the economic activity is happening, or to where the best of the country was at. And then in the environment, there's a lot of lack, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of competing for the same resources. As long as, even if you have that communal mindset, but they're still having to fight for the common resources, right? And so then you grew up with this smallness mentality. Like I grew up in a small town, like a really tiny town. So you have this small mindedness, not because of you're small minded, but because of everything in your area is so small, right? Small everything, small schools, small roads, small houses, everything is small, and everything out there is so much bigger than you. And so you also start thinking that you are small. And so I get to the city, right? Here I am. I leave this small town with nothing in my pocket except the dreams in my mind, hoping to just make it out there. Find myself in some place, 3 months homeless, living in an abandoned building, but working, right? Working in a big city. Anyway, find my way up, and the next thing you know, you're working in these massive high-rise buildings, and you're some kind of a manager. And I'm up there, I'm thinking, this can't be me. I didn't know then that's what I was doing. But then you cannot believe that you've risen so high, you start to doubt whether or not you deserve this. And then I started creating in my mind these scenarios where I was expecting that I would go back, I would fall. I start seeing the man is a certain way. I start thinking that the city boys are better than me. And I start withdrawing into this corner of feeling small because I'm not used to being big. And I'm also not used to being big places where I'm being celebrated. And in the back of my mind, not having been celebrated where I come from by the structures that of power that were higher than me. And the structures that were supposed to approve me and validate me because they invalidated me and made me feel so small. And looking at these strangers who are telling me that I'm this, I'm amazing, I'm great, and they give me promotions, I'm thinking, but what do you want from me? What is it? What could you possibly want from me that I have that will be of value to you when you have so much more than I have, when you're so much bigger than I am? And I literally crashed out of 2 or 3 jobs, 3 jobs like that, where I reached the pinnacle, where I reached the top, instead of then thinking, how do I now move from this high to the next high? I started going down. And I would leave. I'd go, start again from scratch, rise, come down, start again from scratch, rise, until I got to a point where I realized I need to recognize that this is who I am. This is who God has created me to be. And he has placed me here for a reason. And he's telling me something through these people. Brother Mike, I was thinking about this statement today, and I've thought about it for some time. The most powerful voice is the voice in your head. It's your own voice. Because that is the voice that you believe the most. What gives other people's voice the power is when it echoes in your mind now as your own.
Hold on. You just said the most powerful voice is the voice in your head. And I think everybody can agree with that. That's the most powerful voice. But what you said secondarily, or the next, you said it's what other people say. It's not what they say. It's how it echoes in your mind. That determines the impact. And it's interesting that you're saying this because I just recently posted a quote that I heard on an interview with Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant said, "Boos don't stop dunks." Basketball. Boos don't stop dunks. And it made me really, really stop and think about it. It was funny because I had somebody chime in on it. He said, no, boos don't stop dunks. They actually make the dunk go in a lot of instances. And I was like, that's actually interesting too, because how you then turn it into fuel. But then going back to what you said, is really not what someone else says. It's how what someone says echoes in your mind. And your voice is the most important voice. But what's interesting, I have a quote that I put together years ago, and it says, spiritual conviction leads to mental commitment, which leads to you taking action. So it's like your mindset determines the actions that you take, but we have to now reverse engineer what are those influences that are structuring and shaping our mindset.
I mean, and that's, you know what, let's keep it right there. There's a point in our lives, after we have gone through whatever we have gone through, after we've been told we're nothing, and even after we've been told we're everything, by the way, and we get to a point in our lives where all our intellectual competences are there. We've grown, we have experiences, we understand what's right from wrong, we understand what is good, we have a full maturation. And then we can apply our minds to look at our own history and to compare that with our future. And we bring that into our present in terms of what we're doing now. And we can ask ourselves this question: do I want to duplicate the things in my life that I hated or do I want to go against them and try something completely different and be open to being a fool? Because it is likely I don't even know what I'm doing.
It's interesting.
Right. I grew up without a father. I knew that I lacked the love of a father. The best that I could see, the best that I had was observing other fathers loving their sons. Kind of gave me some idea of what it means to have a father. But when I became a father, because I didn't know what it was like becoming a father, I had to learn how to be a father. And a lot of it, unfortunately, a lot of what I needed to do, I needed to do that along the lines of what I thought I lacked, and then try to express that. But unfortunately, because I never really got to experience it, it was something completely new. And I needed to admit and say, I don't know what it means to be a father. I need to learn how to be a father because I want my children to experience something that I never experienced. But how do you become good at something that you never experienced? So there are mistakes along the way. So to be brave when you have not had a father, or maybe when you had a father that was abusive, that was an alcoholic, that was a drug addict, be brave to say, I don't want to go down that path. I want to go a different path. But then to look around and say, for me, it's going to require courage because I'm more likely going to be starting something I have no clue what is and how it's going to turn out.
That is extremely it's powerful. First off, it speaks directly to me and my experience due to, some of the dynamics that I grew up with. But then on the flip side of it, when you mention that it's going to take courage, and again, you and I have spoken about this offline, I have a theory that I call the conquer method, which is the combination of confidence and courage. I just merge them together and call them the conquer method. And the theory is that every decision that you make in life requires either confidence or courage, right? Confidence is because you have a body of work. So therefore you have the confidence to make a decision. Courage is when you do not have a body of work to pull from. So like you just mentioned, there are a lot of men that didn't grow up with fathers, right? And so, but now they're fathers or they're raising young men or they're mentors or coaches or whatever they may be. And now they're charged with fathering or having a father-like relationship with some young men. You know what I'm saying? And so where do you then pull that from? And like you mentioned, you have to develop the courage, right? And that, again, when you say courage, now you can dive into what influences your courage. Where do you pull from to have courage to take a step into the unknown? And how do you help individuals, or how do you personally build that courage to step into fatherhood, not having the in-house example to lead and show you the way?
And the thing is that as you're doing this, where do we get the courage? Where do we get the influence from? And let's take that very same statement you've made, and let's add that next to how a man is judged. Mm-hmm. I have this thing where I talk about the factors of how we measure men's.
So, we had a little technical issue there, but you were talking about the 5 things in regards to like how a man is judged, if I'm not mistaken. So talk to me a little bit, or explain to us where you were going with that, brother.
Yeah. So you're talking about the influences. Let's talk about the influences that the man did not have. Like I didn't have a father, as it happens with a lot of Africans, especially in South Africa and also up there in the US. 5.5 pillars for how we are a man. It's performance, right? And the first one, the least, which is right at the bottom, of course, is about men's humor. Is he funny? Can he make me laugh? Women will say, I want a man who can make me laugh, right? And then there's the physical aspect. Is he tall, dark, and handsome, and all of that, meaning that he can work and kind of like is also proof that he can protect the family and he can be able to hold, stand up on his 2 feet and about certain things. And then the third one is intelligence. Is the man intelligent? Is he able to engage life and be able to make some sensible decisions. The fourth one is position. You know, women always say, "Oh, my man is he's a manager." Yes, he's earning $5 an hour, but he's a manager. It doesn't matter. As long as he's got a position of influence, it doesn't matter how much money he makes, because that's one of the ways that we measure a man's worth. Can a man be able to influence, and can he be respected by others, and can he command respect for those who are his tribe? And then, of course, the last one is that of success, which is about money, which is about, you know, proof that he has all of those things. Whether he's tall, dark, and handsome, it doesn't matter. He's got money. Is he intelligent? Well, it doesn't matter. He's got money. Is he funny? Well, it doesn't matter. He has money, right? And so these are the 5 ways that we measure a man. And so then, when you become a father and you don't have a job, you don't have a position, you don't have any money, you yourself have never had a father, how do you become a man? When the 5 visible things that makes a man are not visible in your own life, so it don't apply to you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No. You're good, and it's interesting because as I hear you talk about the 5 things in which you measure a man, it also sounds like the 5 qualities that are attractive to women in men, or yes. 5. You know, I mean, it kind of sounds like that. But then, to your point, if you don't have a body of work, or you don't have any tangible proof in your own life, that's where you have to have courage, but then you also need an imagination, right? And so mindset literally influences the imagination that we have. And what's interesting, as you look at a child's imagination is just out of this world. I mean, I want to be an astronaut, and I want to build a house that, you know, is 5,000 feet tall, and I want to do this and dig a hole that we can drive through and do this. I mean, kids think about some wild stuff because their imagination is out there. The older that we get, the more rational we become in our thought process. It's no longer, this is a cool, far out there idea. It's, does this make sense? Is this possible? And I'm going to tell you, for a lot of us, we limit, and it goes back to what you mentioned earlier. A lot of us don't have an environment in which we're free to express the best of ourselves. When it comes to imagination and dreaming and thinking about the possibilities, because we've become so rational in our thought process, if we deem something far out there, we don't even give ourselves the flexibility to even dream that it's possible. And so, to your point, if those 5 characteristics of being a man don't seem like a reality, you know, for instance, you think about someone who is unhealthy. Let's just say they're 200 pounds overweight, right? Yeah. And in their mind, they're like, there's no way for me to get a 6-pack and to be, you know, like a professional athlete or whatever. And there's no way for me to get myself in that shape. They, in their mind, start thinking like, it ain't possible. I'm not even thinking that I can become, you know, ripped and in shape and get off of all kind of medications, because I don't see it being possible, because rationally it doesn't make sense for me to go and lose 200 pounds. But then that person with the childlike curiosity, with the imagination, without limits, can say like, man, I could lose 500 pounds if I needed to and be a bodybuilder. Like, what's stopping me, right? But it goes back to this whole mindset. And again, you're a mindset development specialist.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that, you know what, I mean, these things, although they may be characteristics, but they're very limiting. Very limiting. Because what they don't tell you is that you need a character with these things. Is the content of a character that actually make up these things. So when you haven't had the influence that influenced your character correctly in the form of a father, and you don't have any of these things, then what do you become? You know, unless you come across a mind Dorsey who's going to trigger your mind to imagine something outside of yourself. Maybe by God's grace, something happens that you're watching, maybe you've got exposed to something that kind of triggers a possibility outside the walls of your mind that can transcend your own experience. Unless that happens, you find a lot of our brothers and sisters are just gonna accept that to be their destiny. The destiny is that there are no jobs. The destiny is that, well, I'm just a guy that's grew up in a poor environment, and what can I do? The system is against me. All of that. But I love what you mentioned about imagination. Starting with entertaining the idea that there can be something more to life than this. And then you start asking yourself the questions, what is that? All right, and where can I find it? How can I find it? When can I get there? You know, where can I go for help? Who is willing to help me? What is it that is within me that is sort of stopping me from getting there? Is there something that I can learn that can make me better oriented to see something more, to be something more? You start asking all these questions, because once you get to the point, as I said, of maturation, where you have independence of your intellectual capacity, and you're not necessarily dependent on other external factors to tell you what to think, but you can facilitate information as it enters your mind. You can direct it according in line with your purpose, in line with the things that you don't want, and then channel that into the things that you want. And all of a sudden, your thoughts then begin to arrange themselves in line with what you want. Then you develop these frameworks of awareness that help you to notice things that you couldn't notice before. And then you start asking the questions that you could never have asked before. And you start getting the answers that you could never have had before. Then you start making decisions that you could never have made before. And before you know it, after a sequence of very good decisions over a certain period of time, your outcomes begin to change in life.
Ooh, a series of decisions over a certain amount of time, your outcomes then change, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And you mentioned something, and I'm going to bring back to something you said earlier. You know, growing up from where you know the area or the township that you grew up in, you mentioned that you didn't receive the validation from the structures that were there in place that you thought were supposed to validate you, right? You didn't get that validation there. But then as we talk about this whole concept of internal work or doing the deep work from a spiritual, mental, you know, emotional perspective, you get to a point in which you come to understand, and it kind of goes back to what you spoke about earlier, where the most influential voice is the voice in your own head. It's your own voice, right? Once you start to understand that, then external validation starts to wane. And I'm no longer seeking external validation because I understand the power of this internal voice. And we've honed in on what's influencing that voice, right? And then we're now free to be limitless in how we operate. We're no longer confounded or we're no longer restricted, you know, in a box. We're now open to walk in the purpose we're supposed to walk in, because I'm no longer limiting it to what someone has put on me. I'm now walking in what I'm supposed to walk in.
Yeah, I mean, and just to continue on that point again, is that once you start to understand the voice in your head, like let's say, let me tell you about my story. I grew up, you know, during apartheid. I think when it ended, I was about 15. When the first democratic elections took place, I was 15 years old. So you grew up in that environment. And one of the things that did, as it did in the USA, is that fathers had to work very far from home, because economic opportunities were placed strategically far away from our environments. Secondly, sadly, for my mother, similarly. So what ends up happening is that you end up growing up with your grandparents. And with the grandparents set up, sometimes they can have favorites. Let's just say that I was not featuring very high in that list. It could have been that I just maybe naughty. I don't know. I mean, maybe I could have deserved. I don't even know what I'm saying. But the thing is that what that ended up doing is this. Unfortunately, my father got ill, mentally ill, and he was not able then to even be there. And I never grew up with him. So though he was alive, he was not in a position to take care of me. Regardless of that, it still remains that I grew up without a father. Right? It doesn't matter. I understand the reasons, and I can process that information and sort of to a degree have some comfort knowing that, and sort of convince myself maybe if he was okay, he would have taken care of me. or comforting as that may be, it still remains that I still lacked a massive, input from his part. Then my mother also had to work consequently. Unfortunately, she also had to work very far. And she worked for such pittance to the point where there were years where she couldn't come home to come and be with me. And I had no clue where she was. Along with that as well, what ends up happening in the oppressive environment, fortunately, the oppressed even more. And the least in the structure of oppression is the one that's going to feel the wrath. And when I sit back and look at it, I realize that in terms of that structure, I was probably right at the bottom in terms of the least, because I was the one without the father, mother, and in our country, this tribal thing. My father is from the tribe of Amazulu, Shaka Zulu tribe. My mother was from the Mushweshwe, which is the Basutu tribe. And I stayed with her, which basically meant I was from a different tribe. And again, when you create an environment of oppression like that, then you create that competition. So I was this kid of another tribe whose parents were all around. And on top of that, there's also this belief that when people are mentally unwell, they're bewitched, which then basically means that anybody who's blood associated with them, especially their child, then is a child of a bewitched father.
Wow.
These are the dynamics that I had to deal with, that I had to work with, that I had to contend with growing up. And on top of that, I find out that the relatives of my father right next door to me, the way people right next door to my father actually were my close relatives, but they didn't want anything to do with me. So I'm living in this home where I feel like a black sheep of the family. And I find out that people of my father that I thought would accept me are living right next door to me, but they want nothing to do with me as a person, So you grow up in this environment where you having to navigate this environment of rejection. And even though so many dynamics of what's happening have nothing to do with you, but in the end they have to do with you because you are the one that is not feeling or not receiving what you think you're supposed to get. So growing up in that environment, having to figure out when I went to high school, having to forge my mother's signature to be admitted in the senior high or junior high, in high school basically, and then having to figure out a way to pay for my own school fees through school, and eventually leaving the small town when I finished my senior high and I have my high school diploma to go to the city. And when I get to the city, I got saved in high school when I was the age of 16, but then I meet this church and I start going to this church, and then I find a home right in the church. And then there are these men that love me, that care for me, and that teach me how to become a man, that validate me and tell me that, hey, it's okay for you to be loved. There's nothing wrong with you. This is how, and having to learn what it's like to be loved for you, not because of your son, not because of your cousin, not because of you are even the same tribe or from the same township, whatever. I'm staying with absolute strangers. These people are American, they are American missionaries. And in my mind, by the way, being a small town kid, man, watching New York Undercover, Malik Yoba, having that vision of being cool. Here I am, I'm staying with a Malik Yoba's brother in my mind. I'm like, I'm living life, I don't care if I'm eating porridge with rats. It's just, you can imagine from that low to that high, Brother Mike. I'm telling you right now, that's something to you as a person.
That's,
but then
go ahead. I'm sorry.
But the doubt that kept plaguing my mind and the fear of how all of this is going to come crashing down, and then having to self-debase other times, underplay myself, having to mold and become a chameleon, like I used to be a child, to be that to be accepted. It took me a while to get over that. But anyway, let me just hand it over to you to continue.
No, man, I'm gonna tell you, it's listening to your story is so interesting and this is why it's so important to have conversations across the globe with brothers that have experiences that seem very different, but when you break it down the way that you broke it down, it's very similar, because it's very similar to various communities, here in the States, where maybe you're growing up in an impoverished, oppressed community. If you're growing up in a situation, and you said something about how the oppressed oppress even more, meaning like when you're being oppressed, you then become an oppressor of others around you. And depending on the hierarchy, that can be kind of like a double oppression for certain individuals in various communities. It's like, I was thinking as you were talking about various cities, towns, and communities here in the United States and the experience of being Black in America. Like, it was very similar. It might not have been tribal differences, but it might have been neighborhood differences. It might not have been having to, work in this city for that, or that city for that, for a job. It maybe someone got caught up in the criminal justice system during the, the drug laws of the 80s or something, right? I mean, it's so many different things that come into play that then become that tie that bind, that we are all together. We all have very similar experiences, even though textually they may have some different nuances. It is all very similar. It's like you telling that story, I directly identify with you, and I can't separate you from a brother that grew up in Los Angeles, Miami, Augusta, Georgia, New York, or Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the same.
It's exactly the same. The human frame, for me in mindset, as a mindset development specialist, one of the things that I'm studying, that I'm seeing more and more, the human frame is the same. The way that we respond to oppression, and it doesn't matter the degree. Like, if you're an oppressed brother, let's say, you feel in an oppressive environment, but it's a privileged environment, right? I mean, there's no issues of basic needs like food and school and all of that, but there's still discrimination along the lines of color, for example. Now, the fact that you are comfortable materially does not at all protect you from the impact of being oppressed and being treated differently in spite of all your monies. That you're going to respond to that, your frame as a human being is going to be exactly the same. And this is why it's important then to understand that what you just mentioned, something very powerful. The contents that make up the complexities of our struggle may be different. There may be material differences here and there in terms of the contents of that, or that make up that substance of our struggle, that make up the complexity of our struggle. But to listen to a human being and listen to what they're telling you emotionally, what they went through, that's what we're supposed to think and to listen to. Not the differences in terms of, you were privileged, and therefore because you were privileged, then why are you complaining about? The person is saying to you, I didn't have my father, and we had R1 million, we had $1 million in the home. He's going to have the same emotional trauma that I had. It's just that in terms of my own complexity, there's the factor of having to worry about what I need to eat. That's going to have a different cycle in my mind, right? It makes me more resourceful. Maybe kind of oppresses me not to be hopeful. I don't know. But
oh, hold on. You got to pause there, because it's, you said the human frame is the same, right? And
yes.
and when you were giving that example, and that's where, I have an issue at times with some of us in the community, where we look at someone and we say, okay, well, this person has money, so they're on a different level, or this person doesn't have money, it really has nothing to do with that, because the human frame is the same. We approach it, and we might not have the same struggles, but if this kid in a $1 billion net worth family doesn't have his father around and is struggling with acceptance and self-love and all of that, and then this other kid who's living in abject poverty doesn't have his father around, who's struggling with acceptance and all of that, emotionally, they're struggling the same. Now, one kid might be, like you mentioned, might be struggling on what we're going to have for dinner, and the other one, that might not be an issue, But at the end of it all, they're still struggling with identity and acceptance. And that's the human condition. We have to be open to seeing that and getting through what is on the surface. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and he travels the world on private jets with different celebrities and athletes and all of that stuff. And I was talking to him about a few of these, you know, high profile. If I name the names of them, you'd be like, oh yeah, everybody in the world knows these guys, right? And he was telling me, he said, dude, I've been on so many private planes with this particular individual. And he said, the funny thing is, we talk about having the same struggles as everybody else. He talks about having the same issues with his spouse, with his kids, with, you know, this person at the house doing this and this person saying this on whatever. He has those exact same struggles, but he might just be on a private jet. He might not be worried about financial issues, but everything else are concerns that he deals with. And so it made me think about exactly what you're talking about. We can't put people on pedestals or on platforms just due to their socioeconomic status or their celebrity, because at the end of it all, if they're missing a spouse, or if they're missing a parent, or if they didn't have something in their life from an emotional perspective, that human response is the same.
Exactly the same. And that's the thing sometimes, because of we measure value, unfortunately, based on the monetary terms and material terms, then we sort of, we have an overestimation of other people's, or maybe we undermine, or we become indifferent. We become indifferent to people who have a lot. We become indifferent to their pain. We become indifferent to their struggle. We become indifferent to their hard work. And we want to then say, you know what, your hard work is not as hard as mine. Work has a lot of dollars next to it, and mine has a lot of zeros next to it. Therefore, we cannot compare our hard work. But the process of the human frame from where it moves. So even if a person moves from a place of privilege and one moves from a place of struggle in terms of comparison, at that moment, those two people are where they are. They have the capacity that they have, and they're having to move from there. Like, that is normal. And whatever is abnormal in that environment is going to alter, is going to impact them the same way. Now, let me give you a quick scenario, Brother Mike. Let's think about this. You have a poor kid in the township or in the ghetto. His father is there, his mother is there. They're having just grits, maybe with a little bit of, meat or sauce. That kid is there with his father, with his mother. They're having jokes. It's incredible. There is that privileged kid, high-rise building, penthouse somewhere in LA, and he's there by himself. Mommy is upset with daddy because daddy didn't come home again. There is a servant, comes, food on the plate, and all those silver covering, puts it on the plate. Who's having a great time?
Man, if you're paying attention to that example, who's having a great time? Yes, you have this person, this kid who maybe grows up with meager socioeconomic status that doesn't have a lot of stuff, but he has an intact family and there's love. You know, it might not be a lot of stuff, but there's love there. Juxtapose or look at the opposite side to that, and you have this person who's in the penthouse, who has everything that you could imagine from a creature comfort, but he's sitting there by himself. Who's happier? Who is in a place of peace? Who, I'm gonna throw another component, who has the right environment to now grow from where they are? Because it's not always about where you end up. It's about that whole journey of getting there. What Booker T. Washington stated, that success is not determined by the position you hold, but the obstacles overcome to achieve that position, right? So it's not about where you are. It's like, okay, but where did you come from, right? Because for some, they could appear to be on a very high level, but if you look at where they started from, that was a regression. On the flip side, we can look at some and we think that, oh, they're kind of doing okay, but they're not doing all that great. But if you look at the journey that they've taken and you walk a mile in their shoes and you see what they've had to overcome just to get that little bit up that we're now saying is not all of that, you would be like, man, this person moved mountains, because you don't know where they came from.
Mm. And that's the thing. On the same note, I mean, this is what I sometimes I think about, that when you're coming from that low place, you almost have a lot of variables to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of variables from the obstacles that get brought into your environment. Because, and also there's also, to a degree, in a twisted way, Brother Mike, in a twisted way, because of you don't have much, there's still that hope that at least maybe when I have much, my life could be different.
Mm.
There's nothing, although there's a lot of controversy around him now, and he's on trial. But Ravi Zacharias used to, I don't know who he was quoting, but he used to mention, I think it was C.S. Lewis, or I can't remember now, that there's nothing as vain as a pleasure that has no meaning. Mm. When pleasure has lost its meaning, when that incredible plate of food that is served by the best chef in the world cannot satisfy the empty soul, you start asking yourself, is there more to life than this? Mm. Because living the life, this is King Solomon. He's living the pinnacle of everybody's ideal life. And then he says, vanity of vanities, it's all vanity and vexation of spirits because of meaningless pleasure. Mm. And juxtapose that against this, we cannot buy character. Ooh. Cannot buy character. What our fathers gave us is character. Earned character. And character has got nothing to do with monies and the types of lives that we have lived. And to all those fathers out there that think that because of you don't have a pocket full of money, that think that because you cannot bring a bag of groceries to your sons, to your daughters, that it makes you less. Your children couldn't care less about whether you're bringing groceries and that. What they care about the most is what they can receive from you. Mm. You hold their identity. You hold their worth. You tell them, you hold where they come from. And for as long as they don't know what that looks like, they will live a life that's in limbo. Mm. And the same son that you neglected, that didn't have food, and as well as that same son in the penthouse that was neglected by that father, they're all going to end up in the same drug rehabilitation center. Mm.
They're both struggling with identity. And fathers, I want you to realize, whether you have a lot of money, whether you have no money, I always quote this, and this is a really good friend of mine. His name is James Lopez. He has a podcast he has a platform called Fatherhood is Lit. The tagline is presence over presence, meaning your presence, being there, over the presence, the gifts. And that's what Fatherhood is Lit is all about. And that's what fatherhood, if you really think about it, is all about. It's about you being present. It's not about the stuff. Your kids are not going to remember the first time you bought them something, but they'll remember how they used to feel when y'all used to, kick the football outside in the front yard. Or they'll remember, sitting down and laughing at a joke, or playing in the yard, or, rolling around in the grass, playing around. I mean, they'll remember the experiences. They will remember your presence. They might not remember the gifts or the presents that you purchased for them. You can't buy character, like my man Jabu just mentioned. And so, dude, this conversation is so awesome. And again, it is so needed in our society. Talk to us a little bit more about like your mindset development institute and what you're doing there, but then also, lay out some of the things that you have going on and how some of those that are listening can get in touch with you and connect with you way over in South Africa.
Thank you, Brother Mike. The Mindset Development Institute is an institute that I formed as a way of getting out of my own struggle equation. Found myself 4 years ago literally everything that I'd worked for about to come to an end. The tragedy hit quickly. I mean, my first lady passed away, and I found myself in a situation where at the age of 37, I had 3 kids. 12 years, 17 years of being together, 12 years of marriage, completely coming to a standstill. At that time, I was a pastor of 2 churches. Man of God, wasn't earning any salary from the churches because I didn't believe in taking any money from the church, and she was the one that was basically the main provider of the family at the time. And you find yourself in that situation where literally everything that you are facing is about to fall apart. But in that tragedy, something amazing happens. Brother Mike, something amazing happens. Here's a story. I find out that the lady that I really liked in high school is not married.
Wow.
And I had a thing for her for a very long time. But again, my insecurity issues, feeling like I wasn't enough. You know, her brother was my best friend. And her family took me in to help me out, because I didn't have anything much going on, but I sort of moved into the house uninvited, and her family sort of raised me up until I finished senior high. I liked her, but I didn't think I was good enough anyway. So I went to the city thinking I was going to go work and then come back with money, with a fancy car, woo her, get married to her, right? That doesn't happen that way. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I find out and I connect with her again. Now here I am with the lady of my dream, but my life is falling apart. Life is completely falling apart. No money, no job, nobody's willing to hire me. In spite of all the experiences, because they don't recognize, they don't accept my time as a pastor as worthy of any corporate integrity. So I don't get any jobs, right? So I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to do, God? God, what am I going to do? And it was a clear voice in my head that says, what do you have in your hand? And it was a picture of Moses when he was about to cross the Red Sea, having a staff in his hand. And then it was praying to God, and God says, don't look at me, raise up the stick, raise up the hand to the heavens. In that time, somebody calls me, and I start with a problem as a pastor, of course, and I start telling them, helping them how to get out of the problem. And then right there and then I realized I have a body of work of evidence for the last 15 years as a pastor, as a leader in a community, involved in many things. If I could put this into a package that can be able to help people, this is what I have in my hand. That's how the Institute started. And I began to then collect all of my experiences from that time into these frameworks of thinking, into looking at the human limitations, into looking at how the role of culture and socio-economic conditions, even the epistemological structure of the environment that we're in, how do those impact how we see ourselves? And Christian, this is something very interesting about Mike. I had to really interrogate my theology and about how does my theology affect my mindset as an African? What does it say I can do? What does it say that I cannot? What does it say I am? What does it say that I am not? Now, when I looked at the Bible told me that I'm different from what my doctrine was telling me and what some of the theology I was exposed to was telling me. And I realized it's not always about what we know. It's how that knowledge is used, how we use it and how it's used against us.
How it's used and how it's used against us. Ooh, yes. That is it's not what we know, it's how it's used and how it's used against us. And it's interesting that you put it in that term, because when we really think about it, 25 years ago, there was a barrier to entry for information, right? You had to go to various universities, or you had to sit with experts, or you had to pay to go to certain conferences to get access to the information. Now, because of these things, these cell phones and the internet and social media in YouTube, there is zero barriers to entry to information. Like literally, you could talk to a 10-year-old and you could ask a 10-year-old to write you a dissertation on how to perform heart surgery. And you just say, hey, use your phone, use YouTube, figure it out. And I want a dissertation by the end of the week on how to perform heart surgery. Give me all the pre-op, all the different medications that are going to be needed. Give me the post-op, give me the rehab, give me everything. At 10, you can have a 10-year-old give you a full dissertation on how to perform heart surgery from start to finish, because information, there's no longer a barrier to entry for information. That's there. Everything is there. You don't need anybody to tell you the information. What you need people to do is to help you to practically apply that information. And it goes to what you were saying, is not necessarily the information, it's how it's used, or, and I like how you threw this out there, how it's used against you.
Yeah. And actually, that's where I was. That's where I had to now investigate all that I know. And I had to ask myself, what is in front of me? What do I know? What is in front of the people that I've been talking to? What do they know? Now, the question is that how is it that people have so many different outcomes, although they may be exposed to the same information, although they may be exposed to the same type of environment? Now, when I looked at my situation, I realized that it wasn't because of lack of intelligence or that I was lazy, hardworking man, or that I had done anything that perhaps got me to deserve the place where I was at. It was none of those things, or that even I had lacked opportunity, by the way. I had plenty of opportunities, but I had not converted those opportunities into growth, right? Why? Because I had to then take ownership, number one, take ownership of my own role and my own lack of functional compatibility to what was being brought in front of me, to be able to convert opportunities into growth, to be able to look at problems and overcome them, and to become a solution of my own problems. I had to admit that I wasn't observant enough, that I wasn't integrating my lessons into my knowledge pool to grow it so that I can practice, as you say, practice the lessons that I've learned until I become really proficient in them, until they can become tools. Because I had to learn in that moment that skills and knowledge and all the talents and whatever we're good at do not become tools until they have purpose.
Wow. Skills and knowledge do not become tools until they have purpose.
They have purpose.
Ooh, man, dude, I'm gonna tell you, like this is like, fellas, I hope y'all are paying attention. Skills and knowledge, they have nothing. They're nothing without purpose. So if you don't have, it's like you have a hammer, but if you don't know what to do with that hammer, if you don't know what that hammer is capable of, that hammer is just some metal and wood, connected together and something that you can hold. That's it. Like that's, whew. So brother, like, again, your framework of thinking and your experience is powerful, and it has the capacity to really help individuals navigate through the twists and turns of life. How can, brothers and sisters and individuals around the world that are listening to this, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about the Mindset Development Institute? How can they check out some resources and things that you have available? Give us all the contact information, man.
I have a website, the Mindset Institute, mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com.
Okay.
Mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com. On there, you are able to register. I have a course, an ongoing course monthly, the Mindset Development course that I do virtually, and there you will learn these frameworks of critical thinking that's broken up into the principles, the types of mindsets, and then how then do you develop your own mindsets. I also do have currently campaigns that I'm running. I've got a campaign, if you want to contribute to that campaign, in 2 townships where I'm running mindset development courses for these youths in the townships, where I help them to develop problem-solving frameworks where they get to learn that their problems are not special. They're not special, and they should stop thinking that there is a special solution to their problems. As soon as you get into the mind of thinking your problems are special, then you start thinking that your solutions are so complex. And again, the information that we have received is that we have been taught to believe that our problems are so special, they need external intervention in a form of something that is higher than us.
Wow. That's deep.
I'm teaching these young guys who are like me, and I'm saying to them, I was there where you are. I've done facilitation in a high-rise building in Manhattan, New York, and never imagined that was possible. And I was, I'm showing them my own journey, where I am now on a global stage, and there's nothing special about me. And I want them to stop buying into the lie of the one black guy, the one that's different. Because there is this, and I'm trying to help them to realize there is this, something that I call a constant over-exaggeration of black excellence.
Talk about that.
What happens, what I've observed in my own life is this: whenever a black person excels, because of there's this thing where there's a belief that only a few of them are good, then there's an overemphasis on the one that they know, on the one that they have allowed, in whatever system, into the system. And because there is sort of like this gatekeeping mentality, then there's an over-exaggeration, a specialization of black performance. But it's not black performance, and it's not so much black excellence as it is human excellence. That when you give a human being the opportunity to excel, it doesn't matter what color they have, they will excel. And the black ones that are excelling, they're not excelling because of they're black, they're excelling because of they're human. And to not buy into that idea that only one of you can make it.
You don't buy into the idea that only one of you can make it. You mentioned that your problems are not special. Your problems are not special. I want to throw a little something, and maybe this is a slight pushback, but maybe it's just a different perspective. Your problems are not special. You are.
Yes.
Your problems are not special. You are. Because once you realize that you are special, then you start to, if that's that belief structure that you start to reframe in your thinking, that I am capable of solving this problem without outside intervention. So I think we have to let sometimes some of the individuals, some of the young brothers that you're coaching, that you're training, they have to realize that you are special. And guess what? Your being special does not mean that someone else is not special. We are all special in our own way, right? I'm going to bring something Jabu and I might come with some very similar information, but Jabu's going to come with a slightly different take on it. I'm going to come with a different take. And guess what? That's our uniqueness that comes to the table, which allows me to maybe tap into and connect with some brothers that maybe Jabu might not have connection with. On the flip side, you bring such a uniqueness to the table that you're able to connect with some brothers that maybe are like, Mike D, you're cool and all, but I don't really connect with you. That's why Jabu is there. You're all special. And so again, recognizing that your problems are not special, you are, but that does not diminish anybody else. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with the validation from structures or from outside sources. Once you recognize that you are special, you no longer need this outside or external validation. So therefore, it's not about me having to knock all the buildings down around me to have the biggest building. We can all just build big buildings and have skyscrapers, and that's fine. It's not dependent on anyone else, but your problems are not special. You are.
Yeah, you are. And your specialness is expressed in how you solve those problems.
Ooh,
how special you are.
Ooh, that
value how special you are.
Ooh, your specialness is in how you solve the problems.
It's expressed in that. And that is your value. That is your expressed value.
Your expressed value.
That's your expressed value.
I'm gonna tell you, Jabu, look, you and I are gonna continue with our calls, on a weekly basis. We could talk for hours about this. And but I want to kind of wrap this thing up. And so I want y'all to really check out Jabu Zwane, and you can reach him at mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com, mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com, and you can check out what he's got going on. Are you active on social media as well?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. I'm active now on Clubhouse.
Okay.
On Clubhouse. If you search my name, or under Clubhouse, if you search for a club that is called Mindset and Mental Wellness.
Okay.
Mindset and Mental Wellness. Mm-hmm. I do executive coaching, and I do executive coaching. Specifically, the kind of coaching that I do is based on the mindset development framework. And I do specifically for relationships, for leadership, for high performance, and entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And overall confidence, this is another kind of work that I was thinking about talking to you about. But anyway, how do we build the confidence frameworks?
Yes.
That's the kind of work that I currently do. So on social media, if you just search even for Jabu Zwane Mindset on Google, I mean, the first page will be just full of my name on there. And you can take it to platforms that I'm available on there.
Awesome.
If you guys also, I've got 2 little booklets that I've written that I can distribute for free. It's ebooks. Mm-hmm. There's a book that I wrote on dealing with the pain in your life, which is where I kind of describe the process that I went through when I was dealing with this trauma that took place. But specifically, it covers just how to deal with friends and how to deal with people's response when you're going through trauma. And the other one is the opposite. It's now transforming through success. How do you prime yourself to become the person you need to be at different levels of your success, so that your success doesn't outpace you.
And
don't allow yourself falling behind.
Don't allow your success to outpace you, brother. And are those ebooks? Are they available on the website, the Mindset Development Institute website?
No, those are the ones that I have in distribution. I'll send them through to you. And anybody who wants them for free, they can be able to access them via a channel. Mm-hmm. I haven't on my website yet. I'm still extremely busy. It's there now, and you can access the curriculum of the course and be able to register for the course. But I haven't uploaded the books on my website as yet.
Okay. Well, and look, so we'll have links to Mindset Development Institute and social media links to Jabu Zwane. But like you mentioned, if you just Google Jabu Zwane Mindset, first page will pop up, and you'll see a brother like myself with a bald head that's smiling and ready to help you, tap into what's inside so that you can bring what you're supposed to bring to this world. And so brother, like literally, man, thank you. Like, I appreciate it. We're going to have to do a round 2 of this at some point in the near future. And I suspect that you and I are going to be working on some stuff on the back end as well. So yeah, man, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Mike, I really appreciate you giving me the platform, inviting me and indulging me. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate just the trust that you took in putting me on your platform. I know what it takes. I know what it takes to put somebody with your children and talk to them. It's a risk.
It is. But you know what though? But check this out though. See, well, for another thing, we got to give a shout out to my man Keith Sylvester, who connected the dots for us. And so when my man came and said, Mike, there's this brother in South Africa you need to connect with, I was just like, man, just connect the dots. And then when you and I chatted a few times, I was like, ooh, this is my brother for real. So man, I appreciate you, man. You continue doing the good work, and we'll make sure to, share your information out. And fellas, again, ladies listening to, make sure to contact Jabu Zwane. And if you just Google Jabu Zwane Mindset on Google, he'll pop up. But you can also go to mindsetdevelopmentinstitute.com, learn more about the brother, connect with what he's got going on. follow them on social media, shoot them some questions. And if you've not heard about them already, let them know that you heard about them on Black Fathers Now podcast. All right. Well, fellas, as always, make sure to subscribe, leave some ratings, share this thing out. Again, Black Fathers Now is global. We're impacting the world, and we're going to continue doing that. We are on our way to being the top podcast in the world for current and future Black fathers. The top podcast in the world for current and future Black fathers. So basically, brothers around the world, Black Fathers Now is for you. And so until next time, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace. Yo, fellas, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And always visit blackfathersnow.com, as well as follow Black Fathers Now on virtually every social media platform you can think of. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Just follow us and engage with us, man. Look forward to hearing from you. And I guess until next time, I'll holler at you. Peace.